Hello and welcome back to Set 6, and today I've got the first video in a new series where what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a character from the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to review their character arc in the original continuity of Final Fantasy VII, and try to make some predictions for the story going forwards based on that analysis. In this first episode we'll be looking at a character that's definitely going to have an expanded story in the remake going forwards based on everything that we've seen so far, and that character is Don Corneo. Don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content. It definitely helps the channel grow. On the push for 200 subscribers at the minute, we're about 20 away. So, click that button. It makes sense. But let's get straight into it. Now, one thing before I do get going, just be aware that this video is going to contain full spoilers for Don Corneo's story in the original continuity of Final Fantasy VII, as well as the remake so far. So, yeah, be warned. Don Corneo is the main man, the big boss, of the most vibrant area of Midgar's slums, Sector 6's War Market. A lecherous man with a completely self-centered set of morals, the Don's got a small army of henchmen and lackeys that he's extorted and manipulated into being under his thumb, which has allowed him to maintain his iron grip on War Market. He always seems by hook or by crook to get what he wants, and when things seem like they aren't going to go his way, his henchmen step in to ensure a favourable outcome for the Don. On top of his henchmen and his shady tactics, he also has an agreement in place with Shinra. Now, the details of this agreement are never explicitly laid out for us to see, but it is clear that the Don has a pretty wide scope and a pretty large degree of autonomy. Shinra are pretty much a non-presence in War Market, and this allows the Don to do what he needs to do to live the lifestyle that he wants to live. I think that's the nicest way I can put it, yeah. And on the flip side of this relationship, we see the Don doing favours or jobs for Shinra, so it is easy to see how things work. On top of all of this, in Remake, we find that the Don was promised the ability to build a new War Market once the Neo Midgar project is completed, and this adds even more weight to this relationship that he shares with the Shinra. The Don regularly selects a bride from a selection of 3 chosen women, with the women that he rejects being given to his henchmen, further ensuring their loyalty by providing for them. At least for the most part. And it's in this context that we first meet Don Corneo in Final Fantasy VII. The Don's got some information on Shinra that Avalanche need, and Tifa puts herself in the position of being one of the Don's choices for his next bridal selection. Cloud and Aerith get themselves added to the bridal selection, meaning that no matter who the Don chooses, he's in trouble. And we find out that he's been hunting down Avalanche for Shinra. He also then divulges Shinra's plan to crush Avalanche using the info that he's provided. Once the Don's given up this information and the party are kind of deciding what they're going to do next, Don Corneo plays his trap card and makes his escape. And we don't see him again until much later in the game, and when we do see him, we see that he's still up to the same old tricks. When the party plays through the Wutai side quest in Final Fantasy VII, Don Corneo is in the area and kidnaps Yuffie, as well as Elena from the Turks. This leads to the party working with the Turks, hunting down the Don, and defeating him on the face of the Dachau statue at Wutai, killing another one of his precious pets in the process. The Turks then send the Don off the cliff face, off Dachau, and seemingly to his grave, with Shinra having cut ties with him after the fall of the Sector 7 plate. Now this is due to the Don giving up the information to Avalanche about Shinra's plan, and this makes him an unreliable asset and therefore expendable. But that's not the end for Don Corneo, and he does reappear in The Kids Are Alright. He works as a go-between and a fuel supplier for the remnants of Shinra and the World Regenesis organisation. And it's here that we first meet Leslie Kyle. Leslie is a founding member of a detective agency in the Midgar slums, and Evan, a partner in the agency, asks Leslie for directions and information on Don Corneo's mansion in Sector 6. Leslie helps him but warns Evan not to mention Corneo in front of his wife again. After Evan's been to Don Corneo's mansion, he comes back to Leslie with a picture of Merle, Leslie's wife, which he'd taken from the Don's bedroom. After these events, Leslie proceeds to get some revenge on Don Corneo and torches his mansion, burning it completely to the ground, although according to Leslie, Don Corneo survives this. However, even though he has survived this, it is the last thing that we hear of Don Corneo in the original continuity of Final Fantasy VII. Which brings us to the remake, and so far things seem to have taken a very similar path, at least up until the Don plays his trap card and escapes the party. Once this has happened, his mansion is then raided by the Shinra, and once they've, learned that he's given up the information, and the Don is forced to hide in the sewers and plan his escape. Now, this is probably how things played out in the original continuity as well, but we just didn't get to see it. So there's probably not that much of a change here in his story. It's just, we're actually getting to see more details of it. Another difference in the story in the remake is that we've been introduced to Leslie Kyle far earlier than we were in the original continuity. In the original continuity, the kids are alright falls just before Advent Children. So, we don't know about Leslie. We don't meet Leslie at all in the original game. It turns out, however, that Leslie is one of the Don's main henchmen, probably only with Scotch and Koch being above him in hierarchy, it seems. We first meet Leslie acting as a barrier to Aerith and Cloud's entry into the Don's bridal auditions, and over the time we interact with Leslie, it becomes crystal clear that he hates the Don, even going so far as to offer aid to Tifa and Aerith after they beat down some of the Don's henchmen. Later in the game, we learn the truth of Leslie's hate for the Don. 6 months earlier, his fiancée had been forced into one of the Don's bridal auditions. She was chosen as the Don's bride and disappeared the same night, and she hasn't been seen since. Now, shortly after Leslie's told the party his story, they do find the Don in the sewers still hiding. Leslie has an opportunity to kill the Don and end it all, but he fails to get the job done, and Don Corneo does what Don Corneo does, and he takes the opportunity that's presented to him, makes his escape, and seemingly gets out of Midgar. And that's the last we see of Don Corneo in Remake, with Leslie setting off not long after in pursuit of him, after he gives the party one final bit of help in the form of the grappling guns that they use to climb up the plate. And that's it. That's everything that we've got on Don Corneo and everything that we've got on Leslie so far. But what's next? We can guarantee that we're going to see both Leslie and Don Corneo again in the remake. But the question, well, there's a few questions, but the first question is, how important is this story going to be? Now, personally, I feel like it's going to be one of the main side quest threads throughout Remake. It's not going to infringe upon the main story, or if it does, it's going to be right on the periphery of it. But as far as side quests go and side stories, this is going to be one of the big ones, just based on how much time they've put into it so far. There's a massive chunk in the middle of the game where pretty much everything is in some way, shape, or form connected to the Don, and that carries on with the Leslie storyline when we're trying to get up onto the upper plate. They've worked that Leslie story in really well. And I do feel like a lot of the interactions that we're going to have with this story is going to be us kind of bumping into Leslie while he's in pursuit of the Don. Maybe we'll find a bit of evidence of the Don, but I don't think we're going to catch up to the Don for quite a while. If you remember in the original game, it is a massive amount of time until you do stumble across Don Corneo again in Wutai, which begs the question, when and where are we next going to bump into Don Corneo? Now, I do think he is going to try and make his way to Wutai. There aren't many places on Gaia that Shinra don't have a really powerful reach, and Wutai is one of those places where they don't. At least if he makes it to Wutai, they have an extremely strong anti-Shinra sentiment, and it would give Don Corneo the hope of avoiding Shinra, at least for the short term. But there are a few other places along the way that we could potentially see more of the Don. Wutai would almost certainly push our next encounter with him into Remake Part 3, I'm guessing, unless the pace or the order of the story changes massively in Part 2. And they've already kind of indicated that that's not going to happen. But then again, they've said a lot of things, so. Calm is pretty much a no-go, as it's right next to Midgar, and it is the first place that Shinra would look. The Mithril Mines could be a possibility, but again, Shinra would probably check the caves quite early on in the hunt. A better option on the first continent would potentially be Fort Condor, and remember that this is all assuming that the world is the same, or at least extremely similar to the world in the original game. Now, Fort Condor is actively resisting the Shinra throughout the original game, but it's also a very small community, and if that remains the same, it may not be a good enough spot for the Don to hide himself and his remaining henchmen, of which he's surely got one or two. And would the Don's character be accepted to Fort Condor? From everything that we've seen of Fort Condor in the original game, they're quite stoic people, quite tradition-based. They're not going to tolerate Don Corneo. Although, on the flip side of that, desperation makes people do desperate things, and they are constantly being attacked by the Shinra. You never know. I don't think it's very likely, though. Junon is completely off the table, as is Costa del Sol. They've both got a pretty sizable Shinra presence there. But the next place is possibly one of the best candidates for where the Don could hide if he doesn't go straight to Wutai, and that's North Coral. Now, North Coral is a husk of a town, and it's also got quite a large barren area around it. Yeah, there's a reactor there, and Shinra will occasionally pop by there for sure, but for the most part, it's a dead area. It's been abandoned to destitution, and it's also got a community of people that are probably only second to Wutai in how much they hate the Shinra. It has a lot of hills, it has a lot of valleys, it has a lot of small mountains, areas like that would create a lot of hiding spaces where someone could hide away, buy a bit of time, and plan the next move. As far as the places that we know about in Final Fantasy VII and the world of Gaia, this is probably the safest bet for the Don to head to if he can't get straight to Wutai. So if I had to make an educated guess where we're next going to bump into him, it's here. We could always see him repeatedly throughout Remake on the run at various stages, but I feel like Don Corneo is going to be resourceful enough to have already had a fallback in place, and the person that we're going to see running around looking is Leslie. It's not Don Corneo. But then the final question, I suppose, is what's going to be the end game for the Don? Regardless of where he ends up, how is this going to pan out for him? Now, in the original game, I don't know about you, but when he fell off the face of the Dachau Mountain, I was pretty much certain that he was dead. And I think it was more from narrative necessity that he was brought back in The Kids Are Alright. I don't think it was like the long-term plan for Don Corneo. They just needed some kind of like someone powerful enough in that area to be able to manage things like fuel economy and things like that. And with Shinra a husk of what it used to be, and with the World Regenesis organisation kind of on the up, it makes sense that the Don would position himself there. He's probably already got the networks in place. You know, it will have been a simple thing for him to position himself there, so it's tolerable. But with Remake, this is probably going to be the final chance that we get for some sort of closure. I mean, let's step outside the narrative for a moment. Once Final Fantasy VII Remake is done in its entirety, it is almost certain that we are never going to get any more Final Fantasy VII content ever again. It's pretty much a guarantee. Obviously, we've got like these games that are going on, like the mobile games, but the Remake project's going to be at least another 5 or 6 years in the making yet. So once that's finished, I think that's going to be them putting Final Fantasy VII to bed. And if that's the case, it means that a lot of these character arcs are going to need, maybe not to be wrapped up completely, but at least left in a satisfying manner. However, one story arc that could quite easily be wrapped up is Don Corneo's. And I think the way that they'd go about doing it is by having things pan out in the same manner that they do in the original game. Maybe not with him kidnapping Yuffie and Elena, but, you know, he makes his escape to Wutai, the party's tracking him down, the Turks are tracking him down, Leslie's tracking him down, and it just kind of all gets a bit too much. I kind of feel like once Leslie finds his fiancée, he'll be done at that point. Like, he'll want to kill the Don, but he'll have more important things to do, so he'll step back at that point. And that, well, this is assuming that Merle's okay, of course, but that would then leave the story as it was originally, with just the party and the Turks kind of butting heads with the Don and kind of needing to come to a decision about what's going to happen with him. So my prediction is that he is going to meet his end in the same way that I thought he'd met his end in Final Fantasy VII originally. I do feel like that is going to be the end of his story. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. I'd genuinely be shocked if it wasn't. And, you know, I could be wrong on the whole, this is going to be the end of Final Fantasy VII, this remake, but it is. It 100% is. This is going to be the final part of the compilation. We're not going to get anything else. So it makes sense that they're going to tie up a lot of character arcs. And I do think that the Dons, while being quite a rewarding story for what goes on in it, because, you know, he is an interesting character, he's an entertaining character. You know, you hate him because he is disgusting, but at the same time he's entertaining to watch. It's like he's got Ramsay Bolton syndrome almost. You know, you hate him, it hurts to watch him, but you just can't look away. Look at him jiggle. But that's my thoughts on it. I don't think Leslie's going to get the kill. I don't even think Cloud and the party are going to get the kill. I think it's going to be the Turks again, and it's going to stick. I do think he is going to die. But that's enough from me. This is quite a long video already, so I'm going to wrap it up there. What do you think is going to happen with Don Corneo? Is he going to die? And if so, Who's going to be the one who gets the job done? And as a side question, is Leslie going to reunite with Merle? Is she going to be alive? What's going to be the deal there? I'm possibly going to do another episode at a later date for Leslie, but I've kind of covered him pretty much in his entirety in this episode. So I don't know. I don't know if it's worth doing another one specifically for Leslie. Keep an eye out for the next one in this series. I've not decided entirely who I'm going to do yet. I've got a couple of characters that I'm kind of toying around with. I might throw a poll up on Twitter or something like that, but yeah, there is going to be more episodes of this series coming where we just look at one specific character, or maybe, like in this instance, Leslie is so intrinsically linked with Don Corneo, you can't talk about Don Corneo without talking about Leslie as well. But predominantly, it's just going to be one character, one episode, predictions. Thanks very much for watching. Like I say, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content. It massively helps, but more importantly than anything, have a great day.